Our story begins with the protagonist telling us that from the start, he should have suspected her. We see someone asking the woman to take her temperature, and from a distance, a man is watching. The woman had placed it in the wrong spot, tried again, but made the same mistake. We then discover they are in a bank, the one where our protagonist works. We go back a little earlier, where everyone is asking if he's had breakfast. We learn his name is Jihan. He picked up his bag and, with a serious expression, returned their greetings. With a swift motion, he opened his bag and took out a cloth, beginning to clean his desk, something he seemed to do routinely. Later, an elderly woman asked if they were open, but one of the employees informed her that they only opened at 9 a.m. in 5 more minutes. Meanwhile, Jihan handed her a form to fill out while she waited. He pointed out everything she needed to complete on the form. The elderly woman thanked him, and he politely said goodbye. He then called for the next person in line. Everyone complimented his attitude, usually obsessive and cold, but when he saw someone in need, he transformed into an angel. One of his coworkers had seen him earlier that week helping another elderly woman. He was a friendly type. Time passed, and Jihan called for customer number 10 to see if they were present. Number 10 was the woman from earlier. She stood up, announced it was her, and approached him. He looked at her, slightly confused, and asked if she was there to resolve an investigation. She confirmed she was there to make a transfer. She stood up to hand him the form, but couldn't quite reach the other side. He gently pointed out that she could slide it through the gap in the counter, a little embarrassed. He saw it was a regular bank transfer, something she could have done more easily online, and he offered to help her with it. Then he noticed something unusual. He wanted to know the purpose of the 50 million won transfer. Maybe it was for rent, but that wasn't the case. He noticed there was no name on the receipt and wanted to understand the reason. It made no sense to send such a large amount to an unnamed account. She explained she had received a call earlier. She didn't know who it was. A stranger claimed to be an acquaintance and said he'd been in a car accident and needed money. He told her she wouldn't recognize the account number because it belonged to the victim. He then asked for 50 million won to solve the issue. She agreed. Back in the present, Jihan wanted to know what else the man had said. He'd asked her not to call the police about the request, but since Jihan was a banker, she didn't think there was any harm in telling him. He immediately knew something was wrong. He pressed a button and contacted the police. Sometime later, someone congratulated Jihan. Thanks to him, they had identified the scammer from the call. But Jihan said it wasn't over. They needed to create a manual to prevent more incidents like this. His initiative earned him more praise from his coworkers. After finishing the paperwork, he stood up, turned off his computer, cleaned everything, and locked up. Outside, he commented on how the workday had gone smoothly. But then he noticed something. The woman from earlier was still outside in the parking lot, with a suitcase and alone. Jihan asked if she was the same customer from before. He reminded her that the investigation was over, and she didn't need to be there anymore. All her accounts had been frozen due to the report. She had recently moved to the city and now had no money or place to stay for the night. Seeing her situation, Jihan gave a small smile, took her hand, and told her she could stay at his place for the night. As a grown woman, she would understand what that meant. The next day, one of his coworkers asked what had happened. Jihan couldn't quite explain. His coworker pressed further, wondering what he had done to make the woman sit there and watch him all morning. Jihan explained she had nowhere else to go, so he lent her some money and, since she was an adult, asked her to pay him back later. His friend told him to take responsibility and do something about it, even suggesting he tell her to stop taking queue tickets like she was collecting fan club passes for Jihan. He went up to her and asked her not to take any more tickets. She suddenly remembered she hadn't taken her temperature yet. Jihan didn't understand what she was doing. She said she had been told she measured it in the wrong places, so she thought this was the correct way. He asked her to leave, but she grabbed his shirt, pleading. She really had nowhere to go. He smiled at her honesty. That night, she was lying on the bed, feeling the warmth of the room. She opened a door and saw Jihan on the kitchen floor, having not turned on the heater. He had already told her it was because of her. He had lent her his room. She worried he might catch a cold and asked him to sleep inside. To him, it didn't make sense. He asked her to understand how nervous he felt in that moment, but then he immediately regretted his words and simply told her to go to sleep and leave him be. She didn't understand what he meant. He explained that, as he'd said before, she didn't realize how beautiful she was, and that he had fallen for her at first sight. Just being near her made him nervous. Even so, she had nowhere to go. She was too naive. What would happen to her without someone to protect her? She understood. Jihan went to bed, but he was still cold. She wondered if the cold would be that bad. Maybe she should just go to sleep. The night passed, and the next morning when Jihan woke up, he realized she wasn't beside him. He didn't know what was going through her mind. He had lent her his room, but she was sleeping outside. She reminded him of his words and took his hand. She wanted him to protect her before anyone else could hurt her. Then she asked if he wanted to be the first. He pushed her away, thinking she was out of her mind. He refused to hold a mass with her. From her side, she didn't see anything wrong with it. He simply told her to go get changed. Moments later, An was once again in front of Jihan's desk. He and his friend exchanged a long, silent look. His friend asked if he had read the Bible with her, but Jihan denied it. However, the friend had seen them very close together when he arrived at work. Jihan insisted that wasn't the case. Either way, she had become close to other customers too. How much longer was he going to let her stay there? This wasn't a place to live. Jihan needed to take responsibility for her. Suddenly, An came up from behind and began massaging Branch's shoulders, which seemed overly friendly. Branch gave Jihan one last warning, to take responsibility for his daughter. Jihan didn't understand the part about her being his daughter. Later, the employees were heading home while Jihan called out to An. He knew he couldn't force her not to come to the bank. It was open to everyone. But if she sat there all day, she would become an obstacle to his work. However, she had already prepared everything for her outing, having watched him the day before. If she kept doing that, people might think he was forcing her. In her hands, she held candy wrappers, which he suspected might have been her lunch. Afterwards, they went to a restaurant. He understood she had nowhere to stay and no money, but he needed her to listen. Surely they could find a solution together. There were temporary shelters provided by the government in some areas, and also agencies that could help her find a job. So he asked her to stop relying on him. The whole situation had been embarrassing for him. She had understood that, and it made her happy. However, she was referring to cooking the meat properly. All this time, she had been listening to the man in the back. First, she pointed out that he needed to eat. He was amazed. It was truly delicious. The waiter was sure he had served the usual meat, but she had made the cheap cut taste amazing. Another customer thought the chef was exaggerating, but after tasting it himself, he also realized how delicious it was. Everyone started asking her to cook the meat for them. Jihan still couldn't understand her. At home, he let her stay because there was no other choice. But he asked her to use her own blanket. He had told her the day before that he wouldn't be responsible for what happened next. She asked what he meant. He said he might feel like praying unintentionally. He had never read the Bible with anyone else before, and he wasn't sure if he could control himself. But she reassured him. She hadn't read the Bible either, and it was fine with her if he lost control. He blushed and asked her to take it more seriously. She asked him to explain the Bible in detail. He started explaining the first chapter, and she asked him to keep going. So he said he first needed to get the bread and some gummy candies as preparation. He paused. He didn't know why she made him say these things. She then showed him the cosplay she had brought and asked him to continue. He took her hand and asked why she was trying to corrupt his soul, not understanding why she kept asking him to continue talking about the Bible. She simply took his other hand and handed him some bread she had brought, pointing out that it was just a snack. It was the first time a woman had ever given him bread, and the look An gave him was impossible to resist. She asked what else they needed besides that. He stayed silent and began eating one of the pieces of bread. It tasted different, and he combined it with the gummy candy he had with him. She asked if that would be enough. It seemed like she was purposely trying to get him to read the Bible. He asked her for a moment as he ate a yogurt he had brought, also the first time he had tasted that flavor. He wasn't sure if she was pretending or if she genuinely wanted to read the Bible. Still, he was excited to read the first paragraph. He began reading the opening lines with the chalice beside him. She asked what the next part was, but he kept reading, now faster, to the point he began sweating from the heat. He felt it was time to bring out the holy water. She noticed how much he was sweating and asked if it was because he was tired. However, he assured her that she wasn't in a position to worry about others. He went to get the holy water but accidentally spilled it. She asked if they were done. That's when he realized her soul had been purified, confirming it was her first time reading the Bible. Afterward, we see how An wanted to take responsibility. She wanted to help him clean the chalice, since it had gotten dirty after the ceremony. Jihan asked her to wait a second. She didn't need to do that right away. First, she should rest a bit. She must be very cold after the ceremony. He helped her get settled but forgot to put away the leftover bread. He wasn't sure exactly where it should go. Then he went to store the yogurts, but he also had trouble with that. She explained where they should be kept. He realized the conversation had drifted too far. He needed to calm down for now. She asked if she should really stop since the chalice hadn't stopped glowing, But he said no. That wasn't a reason to stop. She wanted to be sure, and he admitted that he did want to read more paragraphs from the Bible. She already knew that. So if that was the case, she asked him to continue. But first, she asked what he wanted her to do. He told her that before continuing to read, they needed to clean the chalice. She understood and began figuring out how to do it. She picked up a cleaning cloth and started wiping off the dirt. He noticed how easily she managed to remove even the most stubborn stains. He called her attention and told her she didn't have to do all of that just because he was letting her stay at his place. But she assured him there was no need to worry and that they should keep cleaning. She made sure the entire chalice was spotless, removing any marks that had been left behind. The cloth she was using was very effective, something Jihan took note of, especially how kindly and earnestly she was doing it. The way she put in so much effort moved him. He advised her to clean it a certain way to achieve a better shine. She asked if that was the right way to do it. He confirmed that this technique would remove the stains. However, while she was cleaning, he accidentally spilled the holy water, but she managed to catch it just in time before it went to waste. After removing all the stains, she smiled, happy to have finished the cleaning. Before he could say anything, she took advantage of the chalice's glow, grabbed the Bible, and got ready to read the first paragraphs.